So the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, has a withdrawal clause, Article 10. It's a permissive withdrawal clause, which basically says you declare yourself with the intent to withdraw, and you wait several months, and then you're out. There's no request, there's no adjudicatory body, there's no decision that anybody makes. North Korea did this. This is a legal option under the treaty. And although it's not the way Washington sees it, and it's not the way those of us who are threatened by North Korea's capabilities like to look at it, as a legal matter, as a disinterested, objective legal matter, North Korea, having withdrawn from the NPT, has every bit as much right to have nuclear weapons as the United States, as a matter of international law. Right? This is why non-proliferation wonks like myself, for the entirety of my career, have worried about the Article 10 problem. The concern that one or more states would withdraw from the treaty, right? Then there is no legal basis for objecting to the behavior of states that pursue nuclear weapons after having withdrawn from the treaty. So, divergent perceptions and difficult objectives, because we're trying to stop people from engaging in permitted activities, those are two partial explanations for why coercive non-proliferation turns out to be difficult, even though we're very powerful. The third point has to do with the question of leverage. The whole idea is you're gaining leverage on these guys, and if you get enough leverage, you can compel them to do what you want, because it will be too painful otherwise. And of course, an implicit conclusion of my starting point, which is we have a puzzle here that coercive diplomacy by and large hasn't worked, is that somehow we have not achieved enough leverage. So then the question is, why is that? Now, of course, this is, just to digress for a moment to a contemporary point that's related, one of the criticisms of the Iran deal was that Obama and Kerry, benefiting from years of effort to put pressure on Iran, had enormous leverage, which they then converted into a disappointing deal. And the argument there is, given the tremendous leverage they had, they should have gotten a much better deal. And it's only because Obama was weak and Kerry was too desperate for a deal that they settled for what is regarded by the critics as a disappointing objective. Well, that's all about assessing your leverage. How much do you have? Well, there are at least 5 reasons why our leverage might be somewhat circumscribed and less than we might imagine. First is that the principal leverage you have, particularly in economic terms, is economic sanctions, which is aimed principally at the other guy's trade. Right? Well, you take Iran as an example. Trade compromises about 19% of Iran's GDP. So right at the start, you have to say the sanctions are targeting only a slice of their economic activity. And of course, you can't get 100% of that 19%. You're only going to succeed in getting some of it. So that puts a kind of upper limit on how much economic leverage you can have. Secondly, there are circumventions to sanctions. We're trying to make it difficult and make markets inaccessible, and the targets are trying to find ways around that. I've been involved for many, many years in various Track 2 exercises with Iranians, and one of the things you often hear them say is, you know, we have been sanctioned since 1979, continuously, by the United States and others, and one of the things that we're really good at, we're not that good at many things, but one of the things we're really good at is evading sanctions, right? By transshipment, you ship things to Dubai or Abu Dhabi, or through Oman, you set up shell companies, you create joint partnerships. There are all kinds of ways. So you're aiming for a limited sliver of their economy. They have ways of evading you. Then the third point is, one man's sanction is another man's market opportunity. If you look at the data, one of the largest effects of our sanctions policy toward Iran is that the European Union has been replaced by China as Iran's leading trading partner. Is this desirable? Is that an outcome that advances the interests of the West? Is this harmful to Iran in the net? Now, I think it is disappointing to Iran because they have certain appreciation for Western technology and Western financial instruments and so on. But they can get by as long as China and Russia and India and others are prepared to fill the holes that are created by Western sanctions. And the record is, yes, that they are by and large prepared to take advantage of the opportunities that are provided by our sanctions. Then the fourth thing that limits our leverage is that in these sanctions efforts, there are non-players and half-hearted players. Much of the world is not in this game. The Latin Americans, the Africans, and so on, they're not a part of the American sanctions coalition. They're prepared to buy oil from Iran. They're prepared to sell goods to Iran. So there are a lot of holes then in this sanctions regime. And then the last factor that I think limits our leverage is that one of the effects of sanctions is to create huge opportunities and incentives for black markets, for illicit trade, below the table. In the case of Iran, we know that their nuclear program got a huge boost by purchasing technology from the famous or infamous AQ-Khan network that was leaking nuclear technology out of the Pakistani nuclear weapons program. Well, the AQ-Khan network got exposed and many people were arrested and so on. But it's the nature of black markets that they're invisible. We don't know how much of that kind of activity is going on, but nobody believes that it's zero. And so this is another leakage that makes it possible for targets of our coercive nonproliferation to limit our leverage. Now, if you look at the web of sanctions that we've tried to impose in our effort to achieve leverage, in the case of North Korea, since the 1993, the first big crescendo of the North Korean case, there have been 18 UN Security Council resolutions. Since the US election in 2016 that brought Trump to office, there have been 4 UN Security Council resolutions. In November of 2016, March of 2017, August of 2017, September of 2017, literally every time North Korea tests a missile, we run to the UN Security Council and get another resolution saying, this is terrible, this is a threat to international peace and security, North Korea should be punished until such time as it ceases this activity. Now, I'm not a fancy political science methodologist, but at this point, it seems to me that if UN Security Council resolutions were a solution to the North Korea problem, it would be solved. And instead, we have this habit of running to the UN. Now, in that same period of since our election, so during the period of 4 UN Security Council resolutions, North Korea conducted 2 nuclear tests and 17 missile tests, the 17 missile tests being the unprecedented high ever achieved by North Korea in its missile testing program in terms of numbers of missile tests. This, Donald Trump declares as victory. Peace in our time. With Iran, there have been 27 major sanctions actions against Iran just by the United States, 6 UN Security Council resolutions, 6 EU sanctions measures. And during the period in which all of this sanctions activity took place, Iran progressed from 0 centrifuges spinning to 20,000 centrifuges spinning, from 0 kilograms of enriched material to more than 11,000 kilograms of enriched material. And across the board, it made advances in its nuclear program. Its plutonium production reactor was making progress, its reprocessing was advancing, and so on. So again, the point is that what you have to look at is not our sanctions effort, but our sanctions impact. And you have to relate the effort we've made to the objectives that we've established